Fire, how terrifying is a dreadnought really? Power, guns, and armor. They called me precise. For 14 years I had maintained the sarcophagi, calibrated the life support matrices, monitored the neural integration protocols that kept our chapter's dreadnoughts functioning. I took pride in my work. When Brother Sergeant Malker told me my devotion honored the Omnissiah, I believed him with my whole heart. I believed that the warriors entombed in those walking sepulchres had transcended mortality, had been blessed with eternal service to the Emperor. My name is Technician-Adept Lyra Meridius, Third Order of the Forge, assigned to the Crimson Exemplar's orbital fortress above Vanquish Prime. And I want you to understand something before I tell you what I learned. I loved them. The Dreadnoughts. I loved their majesty, their terrible beauty, the thunder of their footfalls shaking the hangar decks. I maintained their systems with reverence bordering on worship, and when I discovered what we had done to the men inside, when I understood what eternal service truly meant, that love became the blade that cut deepest. The morning cycle began at 5 hours past midnight, shipboard time. I rose from my cell in the Technicum quarters, performed the litany of waking, and dressed in my crimson work robes with the Mechanicus cogwheel embroidered over the heart. The corridors smelled of incense and machine oil, that peculiar blend of the sacred and industrial that defined life aboard the Adamant Resolve. My augmetic left hand, replaced after a childhood accident in the manufacturum districts of Vanquish Prime, clicked softly as I fastened the clasps. I had earned this position through 17 years of training, had surpassed 300 other candidates to be selected for service to a Space Marine chapter. It was the highest honor a tech, priest of my rank, could achieve. The Dreadnought hangar occupied the fortress's third sublevel, a cavernous space that could house 12 of the massive war machines. Currently, we maintained 7. I knew each one intimately. Ancient Tharivol in Bay 1, interred for 4 centuries, his systems requiring constant adjustment to compensate for degraded neural pathways. Venerable Castran in Bay 3, who had fallen during the Plague Wars and been reborn in adamantium. Brother Dorvath, Brother Kren, Brother Salvius. I knew their weapon configurations, their armor thicknesses, the specific hymns each preferred during activation sequences. The Dreadnoughts were my responsibility, my purpose, my pride. My daily routine followed precise patterns. First, visual inspection of each sarcophagus for any signs of stress fractures or seal degradation. Second, diagnostic scan of life, support systems, checking oxygen mixture, nutrient flow, waste reclamation efficiency. Third, neural integration assessment, ensuring the pilot's brain patterns remain synchronized with the machine spirit. Fourth, weapons maintenance, blessing each autocannon round and power fist actuator. Fifth, armor integrity review. Sixth, final prayers and incense burning. The entire sequence took 4 hours and 37 minutes. I had performed it 2,914 times without significant deviation. The work was meditative. I found peace in the hum of life, support generators, in the soft click of data, scrolls updating, in the weight of sacred oils on my palms as I anointed servo joints. The Tech Marines trusted my judgment. Brother Sergeant Malker, who oversaw the Dreadnought wing, had commended my dedication in official reports 7 times. I had been awarded the Cog of Diligence, a small bronze gear I wore on a chain around my neck. It rested against my sternum, warm from body heat, a constant reminder that my service mattered. The Dreadnoughts themselves were magnificent, standing 4 times the height of a man, encased in ceramite plating thick enough to shrug off tank rounds, armed with weapons that could level buildings. They were the chapter's ultimate expression of the Emperor's wrath. When they walked, the deck plates sang. When they fought, the enemy broke and fled. I had witnessed ancient Tharivol destroy an orc warband during the cleansing of Hive Tertius, his assault cannon turning 50 greenskins into pink mist in 12 seconds. The memory still filled me with fierce joy. This was righteousness made manifest. This was the Emperor's will in adamantium form. During my 9th year of service, I was permitted to attend an interment ceremony. Brother Corantus of the 5th Company had fallen to Tyranid weaponry, his body shattered beyond even space marine healing capabilities. But his mind remained intact, his spirit unbroken. The apothecaries had preserved his brain, his spine, the essential components of the warrior. The ceremony was conducted in the Chapel of Eternal Service, beneath vaulted ceilings, painted with scenes of legendary battles. The chapter master himself presided. Brother Corantus was conscious as they lowered him into the sarcophagus. His eyes, the only part of him still visible, burned with determination. The chapter master spoke the words of transformation. You who have served beyond the limits of flesh, accept now the blessing of eternal war. You shall know no peace, no rest, only the thunder of guns and the joy of battle until the stars grow cold. Do you accept this honor? Corantus's voice came through Vox grills, already modulated by the machine. I accept. Let me serve forever. The sarcophagus sealed. I watched the neural integration cables slot into place, watched the life support systems initialize, watched a warrior become something more than human. The congregation sang hymns of transformation. I wept with gratitude that such heroes existed, that I could serve them in my small way. This was beautiful. This was sacred. For 5 more years, I believed that completely. The first crack appeared on a routine maintenance cycle during the 3rd month of Imperial Year 447, M41. I was performing neural integration diagnostics on ancient Tharivol when I noticed an anomaly in his brainwave patterns. Nothing critical, just an unusual cluster of activity in regions associated with memory processing and emotional response. Standard procedure required I document any irregularities and report them to the Tech Marines. I made the notation on my data slate: elevated theta wave activity in limbic system analog structures, possible dream state or memory access during dormancy period. I thought nothing of it. Dreadnought pilots were known to experience vivid battle memories during their long periods of inactivity. The machine spirits preserved these experiences, keeping the warrior's mind sharp. But when I checked Tharivol's previous maintenance logs, I found similar notations stretching back decades, always the same pattern: elevated activity during dormancy, memory processing, over and over and over. I mentioned it to Brother Sergeant Malker during his weekly inspection. He was a patient man for a Space Marine and had answered my technical questions many times before. The ancient dreams, he said simply. It is natural, but the frequency seems unusual, I replied. The patterns suggest almost constant activity. Does he ever truly rest? Malcher's expression remained neutral behind his helmet. He rests between battles. When he is called to war, he wakes fully. Of course. Brother, Sergeant. I merely thought the energy expenditure might be inefficient. If he is processing memories continuously, it could tax the sarcophagus power systems. Your concern is noted, Adept Meridius. Continue your duties. I returned to my work, but the question lingered. Why would a warrior need to process memories so constantly? Battle, conditioning, perhaps. Maintaining combat readiness. I had been taught that Dreadnoughts existed in a state of meditative focus. Their consciousness merged with the machine, spirit, aware but tranquil until duty called. But the neural data suggested something different. Not meditation, not tranquility, something more like persistent awareness. The second incident occurred 3 weeks later. I was calibrating the nutrient feed systems on venerable Castran's sarcophagus when I noticed the waste reclamation metrics were higher than baseline. Not by much, 0.7% above standard. Barely worth noting. But I was meticulous by nature and training, and inconsistencies disturbed me. I checked the historical data. The variance had been present for 6 months, gradually increasing. Elevated waste production suggested elevated metabolic activity. But Castran had not been deployed in 8 months. He had been in dormancy the entire period. His systems cycled down to minimal function. There was no reason for his metabolism to be operating above baseline, unless he was not truly dormant. I ran a secondary diagnostic, checking neural activity patterns. There it was again. Theta waves, memory processing, emotional response clusters firing in sequences that suggested conscious thought. I pulled the maintenance logs for all 7 dreadnoughts. Every single one showed the same pattern. During periods designated as dormancy, when the warriors should have been in something approaching sleep, their minds remained active, processing, remembering, perhaps even thinking. I tried to rationalize it. Space Marines were post-human, their minds superior to baseline humanity. Perhaps their cognitive processes simply operated differently. Perhaps what appeared to be waking thought was actually some form of maintenance routine, the brain keeping itself functional through constant low-level activity. Perhaps I was misinterpreting the data entirely, but I could not shake the feeling that something was wrong. The third incident shattered my rationalizations completely. It happened during a routine diagnostic I had performed hundreds of times before. But this time I made the mistake of looking at the data with fresh, instead of through the filter of my assumptions. I was reviewing ancient Tharivol's sensory input logs, the records of what his external sensors detected during dormancy periods. Standard procedure was to skim these logs for anomalies, equipment malfunctions, potential security threats. I was not supposed to read them carefully. I was certainly not supposed to correlate them with his neural activity patterns. I did it anyway. Ancient Tharivol stood in Bay 1, facing the hangar entrance. His optical sensors remained active even during dormancy, providing minimal awareness of his surroundings. According to doctrine, this was a safety measure, allowing the Dreadnought to achieve combat readiness quickly if threatened. The sensory logs recorded everything those optics detected. Hours upon hours of static images. The hangar entrance, the corridor beyond, the occasional servitor passing. Tech priests like myself performing maintenance. Other dreadnoughts in their bays, motionless. I cross-referenced the sensory logs with the neural activity data. Whenever a human figure appeared in Tharivol's visual field, his neural activity spiked. Recognition patterns, memory access, emotional response clusters. He was watching us. Not as a dormant machine maintaining basic awareness. As a conscious being observing the world around him. I checked the timestamps. The elevated activity occurred every single time someone entered his visual range. Every time. For 400 years. 400 years of standing motionless in a hangar bay, watching tech priests work, watching servitors pass, watching the days and nights cycle through artificial lighting changes, watching and watching and watching with nothing to do but watch. My hands began to shake. I set down the data, slate carefully, afraid I might drop it. The hangar suddenly felt different around me. Not sacred, not beautiful. The dreadnoughts stood in their bays, massive and terrible and silent. And I realized with dawning horror that they might not be silent at all. They might be screaming where no one could hear them. I forced myself to breathe slowly. I was jumping to conclusions, making assumptions based on incomplete data. There were explanations. There had to be explanations. I needed to speak with someone more knowledgeable, someone who could clarify what I was seeing. I needed Brother Sergeant Malker to tell me I was wrong, that I was misunderstanding the readouts, that the warriors entombed in adamantium were content in their eternal service. I found him in the armory, overseeing the blessing of new ammunition. He listened to my concerns with his usual patience, his scarred face impassive. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "You are asking if the ancients are aware during dormancy," he said finally. "Yes, Brother Sergeant. The neural data suggests consciousness, not sleep." I thought perhaps I was misinterpreting the results. "You are not misinterpreting." His voice was matter of fact, as if discussing weapon specifications. "They are aware." The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. "But then they are not resting, they are simply standing there, conscious, for months or years between deployments." "Yes, for how long? How long does a Dreadnought pilot remain aware during dormancy?" Malchor met my eyes. "Always adept. They are always aware. From the moment of interment until final destruction. There is no sleep, there is no rest, only waiting." I could not speak. My throat had closed. The enormity of it was crushing me. Ancient Tharivol had been interred for 4 centuries. 400 years of standing in a hangar bay, unable to move, unable to speak unless someone activated his Vox systems, unable to do anything but watch and think and remember. 400 years. Venerable Castran, 2 centuries. Brother Dorvath, 73 years. 7 warriors, 7 minds trapped in metal tombs, conscious and aware through every endless moment. Why? The word came out as a whisper. Why not grant them sleep between battles? We have the technology. Stasis fields, neural dampeners. Why force them to endure waking dormancy? Brother. Sergeant Malchor's expression softened fractionally, the closest thing to sympathy I had ever seen from him. Because, Adept Meridius, they volunteered to serve forever. And forever means every moment. To grant them sleep would be mercy, and mercy was not what they chose. They chose eternal vigilance, eternal readiness, eternal war. But that is torture. I was shaking now, my augmetic hand clenching and unclenching rhythmically. That is centuries of sensory deprivation punctuated by brief moments of violence. That is a prison sentence beyond anything a criminal would receive. It is honor beyond anything you, or I will ever know. Malchor corrected gently. They are heroes adept. They chose this willingly. Did they understand what they were choosing? My voice was rising. I could not control it. When Brother Corantus was lowered into that sarcophagus, did he know he would spend the next 300 years standing frozen in a hangar bay with nothing but his thoughts? Did anyone tell him that? He was told he would serve forever. He accepted. That is not the same thing. I was close to shouting now. Several other tech priests had stopped their work to stare. Serving forever in battle is one thing. Serving forever in isolation is another. They cannot be the same thing. They cannot. Malchor's voice hardened. Control yourself, adept. You are disturbing the sanctity of the armory. I forced myself to breathe, forced my voice to steady. Forgive me, Brother Sergeant. I spoke out of turn. May I be dismissed? You may, and adept, do not trouble yourself with these questions. The ancients serve willingly and with honor. Your duty is to maintain their systems, not to question the nature of their service. I returned to my cell and did not sleep. I lay on my cot staring at the ceiling, trying to reconcile what I had learned with everything I believed. The Dreadnoughts were heroes. They were sacred. They were the chapter's greatest warriors, blessed with eternal life in the Emperor's service. This was what I had been taught. This was what I had believed for 14 years. But now I could not stop thinking about ancient Tharivol standing in Bay 1 for 400 years. Could not stop imagining what that must be like. To be aware but unable to move. To watch the world continue around you while you remain frozen. To count the minutes and hours and days and decades with perfect recall, perfect awareness, nothing to do but remember everything you had lost. Your body, your freedom, your capacity for any sensation except sight and sound, and the hum of your own life support systems. 400 years of that. I had called it a blessing. I had called it honor. I had maintained the systems that kept them in that state with reverence and pride. And all that time, they had been suffering in ways I could not fully comprehend. And I had been complicit in their suffering, because I had been too faithful to question, too devoted to think. The next morning I returned to the Dreadnought hangar with new eyes. I looked at ancient Tharivol in Bay 1 and saw not a magnificent war machine, but a prison. Saw not eternal service, but eternal captivity. His optical sensors tracked me as I approached, and I wondered what he thought when he saw me. Did he recognize me as the tech priest who had maintained his systems for 14 years? Did he resent me, hate me? Or had 4 centuries of isolation taught him to feel nothing at all? I began investigating the records more thoroughly. I had access to maintenance logs stretching back to the chapter's founding. Thousands of files documenting every dreadnought who had ever served the Crimson Exemplars. I read them during my off-duty hours, cross-referencing neural activity data with deployment schedules, searching for patterns that might explain what I was seeing. The patterns were there, clear and undeniable. Every dreadnought showed the same elevated neural activity during dormancy, memory processing, emotional response, the signs of conscious awareness. And the longer they served, the worse it became. Ancient Tharivol's theta wave activity had increased 17% over his 4 centuries of service. The neural pathways associated with emotional response showed signs of degradation consistent with prolonged stress exposure. His brain was literally damaging itself trying to cope with the isolation. I found notations in old maintenance logs, comments from tech, priests decades or centuries dead, elevated stress markers, unusual neural fragmentation. Recommend psychological evaluation. The recommendations were always denied. The stress markers were always attributed to battle trauma or natural aging. The neural fragmentation was explained as machine-spirit integration artifacts. Every anomaly was rationalized, every warning sign dismissed. I found something else too. Deployment schedules. Ancient Tharivol had been deployed 23 times in his 400 years of service. 23 battles. The average engagement lasted 4 hours. That meant Ancient Tharivol had spent 92 hours in combat and 3,507,908 hours in dormancy. Combat represented 0.002% of his existence. The rest was waiting. I calculated the ratios for all 7 dreadnoughts. The results were consistent: 0.01% to 0.003% combat time. The vast majority of their existence spent standing motionless in hangar bays, fully aware, fully conscious, unable to move or speak or do anything except exist in isolation. This was the eternal service we celebrated. This was the honor we granted our fallen heroes. We entombed them in metal and condemned them to lifetimes of solitary confinement, interrupted by brief moments of violence. And we called it a blessing. I needed to know if anyone else understood this. If the chapter leadership knew what they were doing to these warriors. I needed to believe this was ignorance, not policy. That if the chapter master and the tech marines truly understood the psychological cost, they would implement the mercy protocols I knew existed in the technical archives. Stasis fields, neural dampeners, technologies that could grant the ancients true rest between deployments. I requested an audience with Master of the Forge Harkonis. It took 3 weeks to be granted, but eventually I was summoned to his workshop in the upper spire. He was an ancient warrior himself, though still mobile, his body more machine than flesh after 6 centuries of battle and repair. He listened to my concerns with what I hoped was genuine interest. Master Harkonis. I began, trying to keep my voice steady. I have discovered concerning patterns in the Dreadnought neural activity data. The pilots appear to remain fully conscious during dormancy periods. I believe this may be causing psychological harm. I would like permission to implement rest protocols between deployments. He regarded me with optical implants that whirred softly as they focused. You have discovered that they remain aware. Yes, this is known. Adept. Then surely we should alleviate their suffering. We have the technology to grant them sleep, to spare them decades or centuries of isolation. We do, he agreed. Would choose not to employ it. My heart sank. Why? Why force them to endure such torment? Master Harkonis was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of centuries. Tell me, Adept Meridius, what is the purpose of a dreadnought? To allow fallen warriors to continue serving the chapter? No. That is the poetic answer. The technical answer is that dreadnoughts are weapons platforms that combine the tactical experience of veteran warriors with the durability and firepower of armored vehicles. They are war machines that think like warriors. And what makes a warrior effective? Adept, training, experience, combat instinct. Yes, and how does one maintain combat instinct across centuries? How does one ensure that a warrior interred for 400 years can still fight with the skill and fury that earned them interment in the first place? I saw where he was leading. I did not want to follow. By keeping them aware, by denying them rest, by forcing them to think about war constantly, because they have nothing else to think about. Precisely. Harkonis's voice held no apology. A dreadnought who sleeps between battles is a dreadnought who grows dull. Their reflexes slow. Their tactical acumen fades. They become monuments instead of weapons. We cannot allow that. Every moment of awareness, every hour of isolation, every decade of forced contemplation serves a purpose. It keeps them sharp. It keeps them hungry for battle. It keeps them effective. You are torturing them to maintain their combat effectiveness. I could barely force the words out. You are condemning heroes to centuries of psychological torment because it makes them better weapons. I am ensuring they can fulfill their purpose. Harkonis corrected. They chose eternal service. We honor that choice by ensuring their service remains meaningful. A warrior who cannot fight effectively is no warrior at all. They could fight effectively with rest periods. Brief activation before battle, time to reacclimate. No, Adept, they could not. We have tested this. The Ultramarines attempted stasis protocols for their dreadnoughts during the Indomitus Crusade. The results were catastrophic. Combat efficiency dropped 38%. Response times increased by factors of 5 or more. Warriors who had been legends became liabilities. The protocols were discontinued after 4 years. I felt something breaking inside me, so you knowingly, deliberately keep them in a state of perpetual awareness and isolation because the alternative makes them slightly less effective in combat. Not slightly less effective, dangerously less effective. A dreadnought is deployed against the most lethal threats the chapter faces. If they are not operating at peak capacity, they die. Their squad dies. Missions fail. Worlds burn. I choose the option that keeps them alive and victorious. And yes, I know the cost. The cost is their sanity, their peace, everything that makes them human. Harkonis's augmetic eyes fixed on me with terrible intensity. They are not human, Adept Meridius. They have not been human since the moment they accepted the Emperor's gene seed. They are space marines. Weapons in human form, forged in pain and tempered in war. And when their flesh fails, they become dreadnoughts. Weapons in metal form, still conscious, still thinking, still human enough to suffer and machine enough to endure it. This is not cruelty. This is function. It is both, I said quietly. It can be both, yes. For the first time, something like regret crossed his features. It can be both. It is both. I have known this for 600 years, Adept. Do you think I sleep well with this knowledge? Do you think the chapter master does? We bear this burden because someone must. Because the alternative is extinction. The Imperium fights on 1,000 fronts against enemies that would devour humanity completely. We cannot afford mercy. We cannot afford inefficiency. We use every resource available, and yes, that includes the consciousness and sanity of our own warriors. We use them until there is nothing left to use. Ancient Tharivol has been in service for 400 years. Yes, and he has saved 3 worlds in that time. Killed an orc warbos that would have led a wog into the sector. Held a breach against Tyranid assault for 6 hours while evacuation transports escaped. Destroyed a Chaos Dreadnought that had already butchered 2 of our tactical squads. Without him, thousands would have died, perhaps millions. His suffering purchased those lives. Was it worth it? I don't know. I have never known. But I make that calculation anyway, and I live with the weight of it. What happens to them? I asked. My voice sounded distant, disconnected. Eventually, when they finally fall in battle, we recover the sarcophagus if possible, extract the pilot's remains, give them full funeral honors. Their service is recorded in the chapter histories. Their names are added to the rolls of heroes. And if the pilot is still functional, still capable of being rebooted into a new chassis. Harkonnen was silent for a long moment. Then we repair the sarcophagus and return them to service, as they volunteered to do, as we are bound to allow them to do. For how long? How many times can a warrior be killed and resurrected? Ancient Tharivol has been destroyed and restored 11 times. The record in our chapter is held by Ancient Malvarus, who served for 743 years before final cessation. He was destroyed and restored 19 times. 743 years, 19 deaths, 19 resurrections, 19 returns to the hangar bay, and the endless waiting, and the isolation, and the awareness that stretched on and on and on until the next deployment. The next brief moment of purpose, then back to the prison of adamantium and ceramite. You knew all of this, I said. It was not a question. When I performed the interment ceremony for Brother Corantus, when I wept at the beauty of his transformation, you knew what we were really doing to him. Yes. And you did it anyway. Yes. Why? Harkonnen's voice was tired, the weariness of centuries bleeding through. Because he volunteered, Adept. Because he begged for it. Because Space Marines do not fear death, but they fear uselessness. They fear becoming irrelevant. They would rather endure eternity in a metal tomb than accept that their fighting days are done. We grant them that choice because to deny it would be to deny everything they are. And yes, we know what it costs them. We know what we are doing. We do it anyway. That doesn't make it right. No, it makes it necessary. There is a difference. I left his workshop in a daze. The fortress corridors felt alien around me. The sacred hymns playing through Vox, grills now sounding like dirges. I passed servitors shuffling to their duties, lobotomized humans, reduced to biological machines, and for the first time, I wondered how different they really were from the Dreadnoughts. Both were thinking beings trapped in mechanical bodies, forced to serve purposes they could not escape. The primary difference was that servitors did not remember what they had lost. The Dreadnoughts remembered everything. I could not return to work immediately. I requested 2 days of contemplation leave, a privilege granted to tech, priests struggling with theological questions. I spent the time in my cell, reading everything I could find about Dreadnought service in other chapters. The accounts were consistent. Eternal vigilance, eternal readiness, eternal consciousness. No chapter granted rest periods. No chapter implemented stasis protocols. A few mentioned psychological degradation in ancient pilots, neural fragmentation, personality dissolution. These were treated as tragic but expected outcomes of centuries of service. One account stood out. A Blood Angel's dreadnought named Brother Morier, interred for 600 years, had finally degraded to the point where he could no longer distinguish friend from foe. During a battle against Orc raiders, he had turned his weapons on his own squad, killing 3 Space Marines before being shut down. The chapter's official records listed it as catastrophic machine, spirit failure. The classified addendum, which I should not have been able to access, but did through persistence and security clearance exploitation, told a different story. Brother Morier had been fully aware during the incident. His neural activity logs showed horror and despair as he killed his brothers, unable to stop himself, his consciousness fragmenting under the weight of 6 centuries of isolation until it shattered completely. They had destroyed his sarcophagus after that, granted him final death. The addendum concluded, subject demonstrated expected psychological degradation patterns. Recommend continued monitoring of Dreadnought pilots past 5-century mark for similar fragmentation. Note, this is not a flaw in the system, but an understood limitation. All warriors eventually break. Dreadnoughts simply break more slowly. I read that sentence 7 times. All warriors eventually break. Dreadnoughts simply break more slowly. This was not a warning, not a concern, not even a regret. It was a technical observation, a feature of the system operating as designed. We entombed warriors in adamantium, knowing that centuries of isolation would eventually destroy their minds. And we called it eternal service. We called it honor. That night I dreamed of ancient Tharivol. In the dream, I could hear his thoughts. A ceaseless stream of memory and regret and desperate, futile hope that the next moment would bring deployment, purpose, relief from the crushing isolation. I watched 400 years pass through his consciousness in minutes, watched him count days and calculate time, and remember every battle and every return to the hangar bay and every moment of the eternity he had volunteered for without understanding what eternity truly meant. I watched him begin to fragment, watched pieces of his personality wear away like stone under water, slow but inevitable. And I woke screaming. I returned to my duties, but everything had changed. I could no longer look at the Dreadnoughts and see majesty. I saw prisons. When I performed maintenance on ancient Tharivol, calibrating his systems with the same precision I had always employed, I could not stop apologizing in my head. I am sorry. I am sorry. I am keeping you functional, keeping you trapped, keeping you in this hell because I am good at my job, and I am sorry. His optical sensors tracked me as I worked. I wondered if he understood, if he was grateful for my maintenance, or if he wished I would sabotage something critical, grant him malfunction and therefore relief. But I could not do that. My conditioning was too deep, my training too thorough. I maintained his systems perfectly because that was what I had been taught to do, what I had been rewarded for doing. And the thought of deliberately failing in my duty was almost physically painful. I lasted 3 more weeks before I made my mistake. I accessed ancient Tharivol's communication logs without authorization. I wanted to know if he had ever tried to speak during his dormancy periods, if he had ever activated his Vox systems to call for help, to beg for mercy, to simply talk to someone after decades of silence. The logs were restricted, but I had learned how to bypass certain security protocols during my years of service. I told myself I needed to know. I needed to understand what he experienced during those long centuries of awareness. The logs went back 400 years. 4 centuries of recorded communications, every word ancient Tharivol had spoken since his interment. I expected to find mostly battle communications, tactical updates, targeting confirmations. What I found was worse. For the first 70 years, there was nothing unusual. Battle communications only. Professional, efficient. The voice of a warrior focused on his duty. Then, during year 71, I found a single entry during a dormancy period. Is anyone there? I have been waiting so long, please. Is anyone there? No response was recorded. Either no one had been in the hangar at that time, or whoever was there had not acknowledged him. The next similar entry came 3 years later. I think I am going mad. I cannot remember the taste of water. I cannot remember what wind felt like, please. Someone talk to me. Again, no response. The entries became more frequent over the following decades. Pleas for conversation. Desperate questions about time past. Attempts to engage tech, priests in dialogue. Most were ignored or met with brief, professional responses. All systems nominal, ancient. Emperor be praised. Your weapons are blessed and ready, Venerable One. No one engaged with the desperation bleeding through his words. No one acknowledged his suffering. By year 200, the entries became stranger. Long monologues during dormancy, speaking to himself because no one else would listen. Recitations of battles he remembered. Lists of brothers long dead. Counting exercises. I have counted to 1,473,621. I started counting at the beginning of this dormancy period. It has been 63 days. I will continue counting. Year 300 brought deterioration. The monologues became fragmented, non-sequential. I was Tharivol. I am Tharivol. What am I? Where am I? When will they? Please. The most recent entries were the worst. Silent prayers, litanies of names, long periods of recorded vox, activation with no speech at all, just the sound of his breathing apparatus, the hum of his systems, evidence that he was alone and aware, and had given up trying to communicate because no one was listening anyway. I was reading through year 397 when I heard footsteps behind me. Brother. Sergeant Malker stood in the doorway of my maintenance station, his expression unreadable. You have accessed restricted files, Adept Meridius. I did not try to deny it. I needed to know. I needed to understand what he experiences. And now you do. What will you do with this understanding? I had no answer. What could I do? I was a tech priest of the Third Order, with no authority, no influence, no power to change the system I had discovered. Nothing, I said finally. There is nothing I can do. Then why did you look? Because I could not stop myself. Because once I saw the first crack, I had to see how deep it went. Because I am complicit in his suffering, and I needed to understand the magnitude of my complicity. I met his eyes. Will you report me? Malchor was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that shattered what little remained of my faith. I read those logs too, Adept. 20 years ago. I made the same journey you are making now. Faith to doubt to comprehension. I thought I could not continue my duties, knowing what I knew. But I was wrong. I could continue. Humans are remarkably adaptable. You will discover this. You knew. All this time, you knew he was suffering like this, and you never tried to help him. What help could I provide? Grant him malfunction and death. That would be mercy killing, and mercy killing is tech heresy. Speak to him during his dormancy. I tried that. For 5 years I spent an hour each day speaking with ancient Tharivol, providing the conversation he desperately needed. Do you know what happened? I shook my head. He became dependent on those conversations. When my duties prevented me from visiting for 3 days, he became agitated. His combat efficiency during the next deployment dropped 11% because he was distracted, hoping I would be there when he returned. I realized I had made things worse. By giving him something to look forward to, I had magnified his suffering during all the hours I was not there. I stopped visiting. It was the kindest thing I could do. That is insane. That is rationalizing torture by saying attempts to alleviate it cause problems. Yes, it is also true. The system is designed to function with the pilots in isolation. Any deviation from that isolation creates complications. So we maintain the isolation and tell ourselves we are being professional, being efficient, doing our duty. Malker's voice carried a note I had never heard before. Pain. Do you think I sleep well, Adept? Do you think any of us do? We serve heroes who are trapped in hells of our maintenance, and we maintain those hells with precision and care because that is what we were trained to do. We are complicit. All of us. And we continue anyway because someone must, and better it be those who understand the cost. I cannot do this anymore. My voice was shaking. I cannot continue maintaining these systems, knowing what they do to the warriors inside. Then you will be reassigned. Sent to another duty station where you can serve the Omnissiah without this burden. And another tech, priest, will take your place. Perhaps one who never questions, never investigates, never reads the communication logs. Is that better? Is that what you want? I had no answer. Malker continued, his voice gentle in a way that made everything worse. You are not the first to discover this truth. Adept Meridius. Tech priests have been maintaining dreadnoughts for 10,000 years. Many have made your journey. Most continue their service, despite what they know. Some request reassignment and live with the guilt of abandoning warriors they cannot save. A few choose a third option. What third option? They attempt to implement unauthorized mercy protocols, stasis fields, neural dampeners, anything to grant the pilots relief. And they are caught because the systems are monitored, because machine spirits report anomalies, because nothing in the Imperium happens without oversight. And when they are caught, they are executed for tech, heresy, and crimes against the chapter. Their attempts to show mercy result in their deaths and no improvement for the pilots they tried to save. So, there is no way out. No way to help them. No way to even leave without abandoning them. That is correct. You have discovered the truth. And the truth offers no solutions. Only the choice of which horror you will accept. Will you continue your service knowing what you know? Will you request reassignment and live with the guilt? Or will you attempt to show mercy and die for it? Malker's expression was unreadable. Choose carefully, Adept. This choice will define the rest of your life. He left me alone with my data, slate, and the communication logs, and the weight of 400 years of suffering I could neither prevent nor escape. I sat there for 3 hours, reading and reading ancient Tharivol's desperate prayers, his fragmenting consciousness, his gradual dissolution into something that could barely be called human anymore. And I realized that brother, Sergeant Malker, was right. I would continue my service. I would maintain the systems with the same precision I always had. I would be complicit in their suffering because the alternatives were abandonment or death, and neither would help the warriors trapped in adamantium tomes. I was trapped too. Not in metal, but in duty and training and the impossibility of meaningful action. The system was too large, too entrenched, too essential to the chapter's function. One tech priest could not change it. One tech priest could only choose whether to participate knowingly or remain ignorant. I chose knowledge. I chose complicity. I chose to continue. The next day I returned to my duties. I performed the same maintenance rituals, spoke the same prayers, calibrated the same systems. But I also did something new. During my work on ancient Tharivol's sarcophagus, I activated his Vox receivers and spoke to him. Ancient Tharivol, this is Technician-Adept Lyra Meridius. I have read your communication logs. All of them. 400 years of entries. I want you to know that someone has heard you. Someone knows what you endure. I cannot change your situation. I cannot grant you rest or relief or any of the mercy you deserve. But I can bear witness. I can acknowledge your suffering. I can tell you that you are not forgotten, not unheard, not alone in your awareness. I waited. The Vox grillies crackled slightly, static and interference. Then, after a pause that stretched for 37 seconds, his voice emerged. It was rough, distorted by centuries of use and disuse, but the words were clear. Thank you. Just those 2 words. Thank you. And then silence again, because what else was there to say? I could not save him. He could not escape. We were both trapped in a system that ground human souls into raw material for the Imperium's endless wars, and all we could offer each other was acknowledgement. I continued that practice with all 7 Dreadnoughts. Once each week, during my maintenance cycles, I would activate their Vox systems and speak with them. Not meaningless platitudes, not false hope, just honest conversation. I told them about my duties, about events in the fortress, about the small mundane details of life they could no longer experience. I asked them questions about their memories, their service, their understanding of their own situations. And they spoke with me, haltingly at first, then with increasing eagerness. Brother Dorvath told me about the sound of rain on leaves, a sensation he had not experienced in 73 years, but remembered with perfect clarity. Venerable Castran recited poetry he had memorized during his youth, verses that had sustained him through 2 centuries of isolation. Brother Kren spoke of doubt, admitting that he questioned whether his choice to accept interment had been wise, whether honor was worth this price. Ancient Tharivol simply thanked me, over and over, for listening. I knew I was making their suffering worse by giving them something to anticipate. I knew that by providing these brief moments of connection, I was making all the other moments of isolation more acute. I did it anyway. I told myself it. It was the only kindness I could offer, but in truth, I did it for myself as much as for them. I needed to believe I was doing something, even if that something ultimately changed nothing. Brother, Sergeant Malcor, discovered my practice after 6 weeks. I expected punishment, expected to be reported for violation of protocols. Instead, he joined me. Once each month, he would spend an hour in the hangar speaking with the Dreadnoughts, sharing memories of battles they had fought together, maintaining connections that protocol said should not exist. You were right, he told me during one of these sessions. Someone needs to bear witness. Someone needs to acknowledge what we are doing. It changes nothing, but it matters anyway. We continued like this for 8 months. 8 months of careful routine, of maintaining systems and acknowledging suffering, of complicity made slightly more bearable by the fiction that we were helping. And then Brother Corantus, the warrior I had watched being interred 5 years before, reached out to me during a maintenance cycle. Adept Meridius. His voice came through the Vox grills, already degraded from 5 years of isolation. I need you to understand something. What is it, Brother Corantus? I am starting to fragment. I can feel it happening. My memories are becoming confused. I sometimes forget where I am when I am. I count days and lose track. I recite the names of fallen brothers and cannot remember their faces. This is what ancient Tharivol warned me about during the few times we have been deployed together. This is the price of the service I chose. I am sorry, brother. Is there anything I can do? Yes. when I finally break completely, when I reach the point where I am no longer myself, but just a consciousness trapped in metal, screaming into the void, I need you to remember who I was. Remember that I chose this believing it would be honorable. Remember that I did not understand, could not understand, what forever truly meant. Remember me as a warrior who made a terrible mistake with the best intentions, and forgive me for the burden my existence places on people like you. I wept while calibrating his targeting systems. He could not see me through the sarcophagus walls, but I think he knew. I will remember, Brother Corantus. I promise you that. Thank you, Adept. That is all any of us can ask for. Acknowledgement, witness. Someone to remember that we suffered, and that our suffering mattered, even if it could not be prevented. That conversation broke something fundamental inside me. I had maintained my composure through all the revelations, through all the horror, by telling myself that at least I was doing something, that my witness mattered. But Brother Corantus's request revealed the truth. My witness changed nothing. My conversations provided brief comfort. Before returning the pilots to the eternity of isolation I could not alleviate. I was performing a therapeutic function for myself, pretending my acknowledgement of their suffering was meaningful, when in reality it was just another form of complicity dressed up as compassion. I requested an audience with Master of the Forge Harkonis again. This time I did not ask about mercy protocols or rest periods. I asked a different question. Master, why do we tell warriors that interment in a dreadnought is an honor? Why do we frame it as a blessing, as transcendence, as eternal glory? Why not tell them the truth before they choose? Harkonis regarded me with his ancient augmetic eyes. Because if we told them the truth, Adept Meridius, no one would volunteer, and we need dreadnoughts. The chapter's combat effectiveness depends on them, so we frame the choice in terms of honor and glory and eternal service, and we let warriors make decisions based on incomplete information, and we live with the consequences of that deception. That is monstrous. Yes, it is also necessary. The Imperium is built on choices between different horrors. Adept. We can tell the truth and lose the dreadnoughts and lose the wars and watch humanity burn. Or we can lie and maintain the system and grind warriors into raw material for survival and call it honor. Which horror do you prefer? Neither. I refuse both. That is not an option available to you. You exist within this system. You benefit from its protection. You are complicit whether you act or not, whether you know or remain ignorant, whether you approve or object. The only choice you have is whether your complicity will be knowing or unknowing. You have already chosen knowledge. Now you must choose what you will do with it. I will bear witness, I said. The words felt hollow even as I spoke them. I will acknowledge their suffering. I will remember them. That changes nothing. I know. Then why do it? Because it is the only thing I can do that is not either participating in their torture or abandoning them to it. It is meaningless and futile and changes nothing, but it is the only option I can live with. Harkonis nodded slowly. Then you understand. You have completed the journey. From faith to doubt to comprehension to acceptance of complicity. You are now what I am, what Malkor is, what every tech priest who has maintained dreadnoughts eventually becomes. Knowing participants in a system we cannot change, doing what small mercies we can while maintaining the machinery of suffering because someone must and because the alternative is collapse. This is evil. Yes. And we do it anyway. Yes. How do you bear it? How have you endured 6 centuries of this knowledge? His expression softened fractionally. I don't bear it well, Adept. I have not slept properly in 400 years. I hear their voices in my dreams. I remember every warrior I have interred, Every system I have repaired that extends their torment. I carry that weight every moment. But I carry it anyway because the alternative is to let someone else carry it. Someone who might not understand the cost, who might see them as just machines instead of suffering beings. I would rather the burden fall on those who comprehend what we are doing. At least then someone knows. At least then someone cares. That is not enough. No, it is not. But it is all we have. I left his workshop understanding that I had reached the end of my journey. There would be no revelation that changed everything, no discovery that offered solutions. Just the reality of the system and my place within it. I could continue my service with full knowledge of what I was doing. I could request reassignment and abandon warriors who needed acknowledgement, even if that acknowledgement changed nothing. Or I could attempt to implement mercy protocols and die achieving nothing except my own execution. For 3 days I wrestled with this choice. I prayed to the Omnissa for guidance and received only silence. I reviewed the options systematically, analyzing each path and its consequences. None offered anything except different forms of complicity or futile martyrdom. On the 4th day, I made my decision. I would implement the mercy protocols, not because I believed they would succeed, not because I thought I could escape detection, but because I could not continue participating in this system with full knowledge and clear conscience. I would rather die trying to show mercy than live maintaining the machinery of eternal torment. Even if my death changed nothing. Even if the pilots I tried to save simply received new maintenance technicians who would continue their suffering. I would preserve something of myself, some core of humanity that said this was wrong and refused to accept it. I spent 2 weeks preparing. I studied the stasis field technology in the Mechanicus archives. I identified the components I would need and how to acquire them without raising suspicion. I planned the implementation procedure and calculated where in the activation sequence I could insert the mercy protocols without triggering immediate machine spirit alarms. I chose to begin with ancient Tharivol. He had suffered longest. He deserved relief most. If I succeeded, I would implement the protocols on all 7 dreadnoughts before being caught. If I failed, at least I would fail attempting something meaningful. I performed the installation during the maintenance cycle of the 3rd day of the 11th month. The stasis field generator was small, easily concealed within the sarcophagus life support housing. The neural dampener required more delicate work, interfacing with ancient Tharivol's brain stem connectors. My hands were steady as I worked. I felt no fear, no doubt. Just calm clarity that I was doing what I needed to do. I activated ancient Tharivol's Vox systems before initializing the mercy protocols. Ancient, I am implementing a stasis field that will allow you to sleep during dormancy periods. You will remain combat ready but will not experience conscious awareness between deployments. Do you consent to this modification? His response was immediate. I do not consent. I froze, my hand hovering over the activation stud. Ancient, I do not understand. This will grant you the relief you have sought for 400 years. This will end your suffering. Yes. It will also end my vigil. I volunteered for eternal service, Adept Meridius. Not eternal comfort. Not eternal sleep. Service. If I am not aware during dormancy, I am not serving. I am simply waiting in stasis until someone else decides I am needed. That is not what I chose. But you are suffering. Your communication logs show centuries of desperation and despair. Yes, I am suffering. I am also serving. I am maintaining readiness. I am preserving my combat instinct through constant awareness. I am enduring what must be endured so that, when I am called to war, I can fight with the skill and fury that 3 worlds depend on. My suffering serves a purpose. To end it would be to admit that my service is not worth the cost. I cannot admit that. I will not. The cost is too high. No purpose is worth centuries of isolation and psychological fragmentation. That is not your judgment to make. His voice carried absolute conviction. I chose this freely. I knew it would be difficult. I did not understand how difficult, but I understood that it would require sacrifice. All meaningful service requires sacrifice. To grant me mercy now would be to invalidate my choice, to declare that I was wrong to volunteer, that my suffering has been pointless. I reject that. My suffering has meaning because I choose to give it meaning. Take that away, and you reduce me from a warrior enduring impossible service to a victim who needs saving. I am not a victim. I am ancient Tharivol of the Crimson Exemplars, and I will serve until final cessation. Aware through every moment, because that is what service means. I was shaking. But you begged for relief in your communication logs. You called out for conversation, for acknowledgement, for anything to break the isolation. Yes. Because I am still human enough to suffer, and to want relief from suffering. But I am also still warrior enough to refuse that relief when it conflicts with my purpose. These two truths coexist. I suffer. I endure. I serve. I do not need you to save me from my own choices. What about the others? Brother Corantus is fragmenting. Venerable Castron speaks of madness. Are their choices still valid when they did not understand the full consequences? No one ever understands the full consequences of their choices. Adept. We make decisions based on incomplete information and live with the results. This is true for all beings, not just Dreadnought pilots. Yes, we were deceived about the nature of eternal service. Yes, we suffer in ways we did not anticipate, but we also serve in ways we could not have served otherwise. 3 worlds stand because I endured 400 years. How many lives is that worth? How much suffering offsets planetary extinction? I don't know. Neither do I. But I made my choice, and I will honor it. Remove your mercy protocols, Adept Meridius. Let me continue my service as I volunteered to do. I removed the stasis field generator with numb hands, disconnected the neural dampener, sealed the sarcophagus panels. Ancient Tharivol's optical sensors tracked me throughout the process, and I could not tell if he was grateful or disappointed or simply accepting of reality as it was. Why? I asked finally. Why choose this? Why refuse relief when it is offered? Because meaning is found in the choice to endure, not in the comfort of escape. Because someone must be willing to bear impossible burdens, and I chose to be someone. Because I am a warrior of the Adeptus Astartes, and warriors do not flee from pain. We transform it into purpose. His voice softened. And because, Adept Meridius, if I accepted your mercy, I would have to admit that my service was not worth the cost. I would have to look back on 400 years and call them wasted, call them torture, call them meaningless. I cannot do that, so I call them service instead. I call them sacrifice. I call them meaningful. And in calling them that, I make them that. I left the hangar bay and walked directly to Brother Sergeant Malker's quarters. I told him everything. What I had attempted, why I had failed, what ancient Tharivol had said. He listened without interruption. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then, the machine, spirits detected your modifications within 47 seconds of installation. Master Harkonis has been monitoring since you began. He let you proceed to see what you would do when confronted with the pilot's refusal. Then I am condemned. Yes. Attempting to implement unauthorized modifications to a Dreadnought sarcophagus constitutes tech heresy. The sentence is death. The execution will be carried out within 3 days. I felt nothing, no fear, no regret, just tired acceptance. I understand. Do you? Do you understand what you have learned here? It is not that the system is evil, though it is. It is not that we are monsters, though we are. It is that the warriors we entome choose their torment freely and call it service. They refuse mercy because accepting mercy would require admitting their suffering was pointless. So they transform suffering into meaning through sheer force of will, and we maintain the systems that allow them to continue doing so. Your attempted mercy was not kindness, Adept. It was an attack on their chosen purpose. You tried to save them from themselves. They were deceived. They did not understand what they were choosing. No one ever does, but the choice remains theirs. Ancient Tharivol has endured 400 years and refused relief when offered. That is not a victim. That is a warrior of conviction so absolute that he would rather suffer eternally than admit his sacrifice was meaningless. Can you not see the terrible beauty in that? Can you not see why we honor them, even as we trap them, even as we maintain their suffering? I see it. I do not accept it. Then you will die with your conscience intact, and another tech, priest, will take your place, and the system will continue exactly as it was before. Your death will change nothing. Ancient Tharivol will continue his vigil. The other Dreadnoughts will continue theirs. The chapter will continue grinding warriors into weapons and calling it honor. The only difference is that you will be gone. Yes, and that is a difference I can live with. Or rather, die with. Malkor's expression softened. I will ensure your execution is quick. It is the only mercy I can offer. Thank you, brother, Sergeant. I spent my final 3 days in a holding cell deep within the fortress. They allowed me a data slate to record a final testimony, a privilege granted to those condemned for ideological crimes rather than corruption or cowardice. I wrote everything I had learned, the truth about Dreadnought service, the psychological cost of eternal awareness, the conversations I had shared with Ancient Tharivol and the others, the revelation that they chose suffering over relief, meaning over comfort, purpose over peace. I wrote it not because I thought it would change anything. The testimony would be filed in the classified archives, where no one would read it except future tech priests making the same journey I had made. But I wrote it anyway because someone needed to acknowledge what I had learned. Someone needed to state clearly, this is what we do to heroes, and they accept it willingly, and that willing acceptance does not make it less terrible. On the third day, Brother Sergeant Malkor came to my cell. It is time, Adept Meridius. I followed him to the execution chamber. Master Harkonis was present, as was the chapter's chaplain and a representative of the Mechanicus priesthood. The ceremony was brief. My crimes were read aloud. Unauthorized modification of sacred war machines, tech, heresy, violation of the Omnissiah's mysteries. I did not contest the charges. I had committed every act they described. The chaplain asked if I had final words. I said, I do not regret my actions. I only regret that they were futile. I pray that the Omnissiah will judge me on my intentions rather than my results. But I do not expect mercy, and I do not ask for it. Master Harkonis spoke then, his voice heavy with centuries. Adept Meridius, you attempted to show compassion where compassion was forbidden. You saw suffering and tried to alleviate it. You acted according to conscience rather than protocol. These are admirable qualities in a human being. They are fatal flaws in a servant of the Mechanicus. You would have made a poor tech priest, but might have been a good person. The Imperium has no use for good people, only functional servants. You have failed to be functional. Therefore, you must be removed. I understand, Master. Do you? Do you truly? You die believing you attempted righteousness and failed. I tell you now, you succeeded in nothing except demonstrating the futility of mercy in a system that has no room for it. You tried to save Ancient Tharivol from his own choice, and he refused salvation. You tried to implement change in a system 10,000 years old, and the system destroyed you. You accomplished nothing except your own execution. Do you understand that your death is meaningless? Yes, and I choose it anyway. Because some things are worth dying for even if they accomplish nothing. Because I would rather die attempting kindness than live participating in cruelty. Because at the end, I want to be able to say that I tried, even if trying changed nothing. Harkonnen nodded slowly. Then you have learned the final lesson, the hardest lesson, that righteousness and futility are not mutually exclusive. That one can be completely correct and completely powerless simultaneously. That understanding the truth does not grant the ability to change it. You die with that knowledge. It is the only legacy you will have. The execution was performed by bolt pistol, quick and clean as promised. Brother, Sergeant Malcor pulled the trigger himself. He owed me that much. One shot. Instant cessation. No suffering. More mercy than the warriors I had tried to save would ever know. I am dead now. I have been dead for 17 years, 3 months, and 6 days as of the moment you are reading this testimony. My body was cremated, and my ashes scattered in the fortress's garden of remembrance, a small plot where failed servants are commemorated. My name is listed on a bronze plaque among 243 others. No one visits. But my testimony remains. Filed in Archive Chamber 7, Section Theta, Classification Level Crimson. You who are reading this have access to classified materials. You are probably making the same journey I made. Faith to doubt to comprehension. You have discovered something about the Dreadnoughts that disturbs you. You are searching for answers, for understanding, for some way to reconcile what you have learned with what you believed. I cannot offer you solutions. I can only tell you what I learned. The Dreadnoughts suffer eternally. This is known. This is accepted. This is by design. They choose this suffering freely, or as freely as any choice made with incomplete information can be called free. They refuse mercy, because accepting mercy would invalidate their sacrifice, would transform their service from meaningful to meaningless. We maintain the systems that keep them suffering because they have chosen suffering, and to deny them that choice would be to reduce them from warriors to victims. The system is evil. The warriors are heroic. These truths coexist. You are complicit. I was complicit. Everyone who serves is complicit. Knowledge does not grant immunity. Understanding does not provide escape. You have 3 options. Continue your service with full knowledge of what you maintain, request reassignment, and live with the guilt of abandonment, or attempt to implement mercy and die achieving nothing. I chose the 3rd option. It changed nothing. The Dreadnoughts still stand in their bays, aware through every moment, counting the hours until the next deployment, the next brief purpose, the next return to isolation. Ancient Tharivol has served for 417 years now. He will serve for centuries more. And Tech, priests like you will maintain his systems with precision and care, keeping him trapped and functional. Because that is what service means in the Imperium of Man. I do not ask you to follow my example. I do not claim my choice was right. I only ask that you acknowledge what you are doing, that you bear witness, that you remember that these warriors suffer and that their suffering matters even if it cannot be prevented. And I ask that you remember me. Remember Technician-Adept Lyra Meridius, 3rd Order of the Forge, who maintained Dreadnoughts with reverence and love and precision for 14 years before she understood what that maintenance truly meant. Who tried to show mercy and failed? Who chose death over complicity even though that choice accomplished nothing? Remember that I tried. Remember that it mattered to me, even if it changed nothing. That is all any of us can ask for in the end. Acknowledgement. witness. Someone to remember that we suffered, and that our suffering mattered, even if it could not be prevented. The Dreadnoughts will continue their vigil. The Imperium will continue grinding souls into raw material for survival. The system will persist long after everyone who questions it has been silenced or converted or killed. But somewhere in the archives, testimonies like mine will remain. Proof that some people saw the truth and could not accept it. Proof that righteousness and futility are not mutually exclusive. Proof that some people died trying to be kind in a universe that has no room for kindness. If you are reading this, you already know too much to return to faith. You cannot unknow what you have learned. So I leave you with the question that haunted my final days. The question that has no answer, but demands asking anyway. What cost is too high for survival? At what point does the price paid for humanity's continuation exceed the value of that continuation? When does eternal vigilance become eternal torture? When does sacrifice become atrocity? Where is the line between necessary cruelty and unspeakable evil? I do not know. I never knew. But I died believing that some lines should not be crossed, even if crossing them is necessary. I died believing that some costs are too high, even if paying them is the only option. I died believing that choosing futile righteousness over effective evil still matters, somewhere, to someone. I hope I was right. I fear I was not. The Emperor protects, they say. But who protects the warriors trapped in metal tombs? Aware through every moment of eternity, suffering because they chose to suffer, martyred on altars they built themselves. Who protects them from their own choices? Who saves them from their own conviction? No one. That is the answer I learned. No one. They save themselves by calling their torment service, their despair duty, their eternal isolation eternal readiness. They transform suffering into meaning through force of will so absolute it becomes indistinguishable from madness. And we honor them for it. We call them heroes. We maintain their systems with reverence and precision. We trap them and call it blessing. We torture them and call it glory. This is the Imperium. This is eternal service. This is what it means to be a Dreadnought, and this is what it cost me to understand it. My name was Lyra Meridius. I was precise. I was faithful. I was complicit. I tried to show mercy and died for it. Remember me when you stand in the Dreadnought hangar and hear the hum of life. Support systems and know that behind that hum, 7 minds are counting seconds into infinity. Remember me when you perform maintenance with precision and care. Remember me when you speak the prayers that bless their eternal suffering. Remember that I tried. Remember that it changed nothing. Remember that I died anyway, believing that some deaths matter even when they accomplish nothing. Remember